I stood at what used to be the entrance to my family's 80-acre property, staring at a wrought iron gate that definitely wasn't there 2 years ago. Beyond it stretched an entire neighborhood: sidewalks, streetlights, manicured lawns, and rows upon rows of identical beige houses, 58 of them to be exact. I counted twice. A woman in her mid-40s marched toward me, her heels clicking against the pristine asphalt. Designer sunglasses, pearl necklace, and a smile that could cut glass. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with false politeness. "This is private property. Meadowbrook Estates, residents and guests only." I blinked at her, still processing the impossibility of what I was seeing. "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. This is my land. My father's land. I inherited your land." She laughed, actually laughed, like I'd just told the funniest joke she'd heard all week. "I'm Emma Johnson, HOA, president of Meadowbrook Estates, and I can assure you this is definitely not your land. Now, I suggest you leave before I call the police for trespassing." My hand tightened around the property deed in my pocket, the same deed my grandfather got in 1947. This was going to be interesting. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city and local time in the comments below, and if you enjoy stories about entitled HOA presidents getting what they deserve, hit that subscribe button, because this one's going to blow your mind. Trust me, you'll want to stick around until the end. Let me back up and explain how I ended up staring at a neighborhood that shouldn't exist. 3 years ago, my father passed away after a short battle with cancer. It hit fast and hard, and before I knew it, I was standing at his funeral holding the deed to 80 acres of beautiful Pennsylvania countryside. Rolling Meadows, a creek that ran along the eastern boundary patches of old-growth forest. It was the land my grandfather bought after World War II, the land my father worked his entire life to keep in the family. The timing couldn't have been worse. I'd just signed a 2-year contract for a massive demolition project in Dubai. The money was life-changing enough to expand my business back home and maybe finally settle down. My father had encouraged me to take it before he got sick. "Build your future, son," he'd said. "This land isn't going anywhere." I'd left Mr. Henderson, our neighbor of 30 years, in charge of checking on the property. He was 78 sharp as a tack and lived on the adjacent 5 acres. Every week he'd send me photos and updates. Everything was fine, until 18 months ago when the messages stopped. I found out 3 weeks later that Mr. Henderson had died peacefully in his sleep. His daughter left me a voicemail. I was underwater on the Dubai project. Literally, we were demolishing old port structures and couldn't get away. No direct flights, no breaks in the contract. I sent flowers and a donation to the charity his family requested. I felt like garbage for not being there. That's when things must have started. With no one watching the property, someone saw an opportunity. That someone was Emma Johnson. My lawyer Marcus Chen laid it all out for me in his office the day after my confrontation at the gate. The documents spread across his desk looked official: county seals, notarized signatures, the works. But they were forgeries, sophisticated ones. According to these records, Marcus said, adjusting his glasses, your property was declared abandoned due to unpaid property taxes. It went to county auction, and Emma Johnson purchased it for $47,000. But I never missed a payment. I slammed my hand on the desk. I have automatic payments set up. Bank records, receipts, everything. I know. And those records prove these documents are fraudulent. But here's the problem. Emma Johnson's husband, Dale Johnson, is the deputy county administrator. He oversees property records and tax assessments. My blood ran cold. So she married into the perfect position to pull off property fraud. Exactly, and it gets worse. She subdivided the land, sold 58 lots to a development company for $4.2 million, and the houses were built within 14 months. Fast, cheap construction. Those families paid between $300,000 and $450,000 for their homes. I sat back, my head spinning. 58 families. Real people who thought they'd bought legitimate homes. People with kids, dogs, mortgages. They were victims too. Can we prove the forgery? I asked. Marcus nodded slowly. Yes, but it'll take time and money. The real question is, what happens to those families when we do? I drove back to the property that evening and parked across from the main entrance. I watched families coming home from work, kids playing basketball in driveways, an elderly couple walking their dog. Normal people living their lives completely unaware they were living on stolen land. The next morning, I decided to confront Emma directly. The HOA office was located in a converted house at the center of the development. Inside, everything was expensive: marble countertops, leather furniture, fresh flowers. This wasn't some volunteer operation. This was a business. Emma looked up from her computer when I walked in. Recognition flashed in her eyes, followed by annoyance. You, again. I thought I made myself clear. We need to talk, I said, closing the door behind me. I have the original deed to this property. I have tax payment records going back 30 years. I have my father's death certificate and will. This land is mine and you know it. For just a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Not guilt calculation. She was weighing her options, deciding how to play this. Then she smiled. That's adorable, she said, standing up and walking around her desk. You have some old papers and you think that means something. Let me tell you how this works. My husband oversees county records. The county records show I legally purchased this property at auction. I have permits, approved surveys, legal documentation for every single step of this development. What do you have? Some yellow deed from 1947? Those documents are forged. Prove it. She crossed her arms. Take me to court. Spend the next 5 years and $500,000 fighting me. And even if, and that's a big if, you somehow win what? Then you're going to bulldoze 58 houses, make 58 families homeless. How do you think that's going to play in court? In the media, she had thought this through. Every angle, every consequence. This wasn't her first rodeo. Good luck proving anything, she continued, her voice dropping to something almost sympathetic. My husband oversees county records. The assessor who processed the sale is a close family friend. The developer who built these homes. He's retired in Florida now. You're chasing ghosts. She walked to the door and opened it. Now get out of my office before I call the police. And stay away from Meadowbrook Estates. You're not welcome here. I left, but not because she'd intimidated me. I left because I needed a better plan. Emma Johnson had made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated exactly how good I am at tearing things down. I spent $15 0 inches the first week alone. Marcus connected me with Rebecca Stone, a private investigator who specialized in fraud cases, and David Kim, a forensic document examiner who'd testified in federal court over 100 times. If Emma's documents were fake, David would prove it. If there was a trail to follow, Rebecca would find it. 3 weeks later, we met at Marcus's office. The conference room table was covered in documents, photographs, and printouts. Rebecca started. Emma and Dale Johnson moved to the county 8 years ago, she said, pulling up a timeline on her laptop. Dale got hired as assistant county administrator within 6 months. Fast promotion. 2 years later, he's deputy administrator, which gave him oversight of property records, tax assessments, and auction processes. Convenient, I muttered. Very. Now look at this. She slid a document across the table. 18 months ago, your property was flagged as abandoned with delinquent taxes. The notice was supposedly mailed to your address. I never received any notice, because it was never sent. The system shows it as mailed, but there's no postal tracking, no certified mail receipt, nothing. It's a ghost entry. Someone with access to the system created a fake record. David jumped in. I examined the tax delinquency documents. The signatures are forged, very well done, but forged. The person who created these used high-resolution scans of genuine county seals and signatures, then printed them on authentic county paper stock. They had inside access, Dale Johnson, Marcus said. Almost certainly. But there's another player. Rebecca pulled up a photo of a nervous-looking man in his 50s, Thomas Webb County tax assessor. He processed the abandoned property declaration and the auction paperwork. I interviewed him yesterday, and Rebecca smiled. He kept records. Detailed records. Emails, text messages, handwritten notes. He's terrified of Emma and Dale, and he's been keeping an insurance policy in case they try to throw him under the bus. Will he testify? I asked. He's scared, but I think we can convince him, especially if we can guarantee immunity. Over the next month, the picture became crystal clear. Emma had identified my property shortly after Mr. Henderson died. With no one watching, she had Dale flag it as abandoned. Webb created the fake tax delinquency records. The property was rushed through a sham auction where Emma was the only bidder. She paid $47,000 for 80 acres worth at least $2 million. Then came the brilliant part. Emma didn't develop the property herself. She subdivided it into 58 lots and sold them to Greenfield Development Corporation for $4.2 million. Greenfield built the houses quickly using cheap materials and labor. They sold the houses to unsuspecting families making their profit. Then Greenfield's owner, Richard Pearson, retired to Florida with his millions. Emma positioned herself as HOA, president of the new community, giving her control over everything. She set up a property management company owned by a Shell LLC registered to her sister that collected $600 per month from each household. That's $34,800 every single month, over $400,000 a year pure profit. But she wasn't done stealing. Rebecca discovered that Emma had been skimming from HOA funds too. She'd approved contracts with overpriced vendors who kicked back 30% to her management company. Landscape services, pool maintenance, security, all inflated. The total take Emma and Dale had profited at least $6.8 million from my land, and they were still collecting. I needed to meet with the homeowners, see who I was really dealing with. One evening I attended an HOA meeting. Emma ran it like a dictator, no discussion, no debate. She announced new rules, new fees, new restrictions. People looked frustrated but afraid to speak up. After the meeting, I approached a young couple in the parking lot. They introduced themselves as Sarah and Jake Miller. "How much did you pay for your house?" I asked. $385,000, Sarah said. "Why? Did you know the HOA president used to be married to a county official who helped her acquire this land?" Jake frowned. "We knew her husband worked for the county. Is there a problem?" I explained everything carefully, showing them documents, tax records, the original deed. Their faces went from confusion to shock to anger. "So our house? It's not legally ours," Sarah whispered. "Your purchase was legitimate. You were defrauded too. But legally the land under your house is still mine." They sat in their car processing. Finally, Jake looked up. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to make this right," I said. "For everyone. But I need time." Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly met with other homeowners. The Martinez family who'd sunk their life savings into their house. The Hendersons Jr., no relation to my old neighbor, a retired couple who'd downsized from their family home. Most were good people who'd been lied to. But some were loyal to Emma. She'd cultivated allies by offering them positions on HOA committees, small perks, a sense of status. When word got around that I was claiming ownership, Emma went on the offensive. At the next community meeting, she stood before 60 angry homeowners and painted me as a con artist. "This man," she pointed at me in the back row, "is trying to steal your homes. He has fake documents claiming he owns our land. He's threatened legal action. He wants to make you homeless so he can resell the property for millions." People shouted. Someone called me a crook. A man in his 60s stood up and said, "We'll fight you in court. You'll never take our homes." I tried to speak, but Emma cut me off. "Security will escort you out. You're banned from all HOA property." As 2 security guards approached, Sarah Miller stood up. "Wait," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I've seen his documents. They're real." "Emma, can you show us the original purchase records?" The tax auction paperwork. Emma's face hardened. "Those records are confidential HOA business." "That doesn't make sense," Jake added. "If everything's legitimate, why can't we see them?" Emma slammed her gavel. Meeting adjourned. Everyone out. Now. I left knowing that I'd planted seeds of doubt. Emma was powerful, but she'd made enemies with her tyrannical leadership. Those cracks were about to become chasms. Because I'd just found out about Phase 2, Rebecca called me the next morning. "You need to see this." In her office, she showed me building permits filed with the county just 3 weeks ago. Plans for 40 more houses on the remaining 22 acres of my property. Permits filed under my forged signature. "She's doing it again," I breathed. "It gets worse. She's already sold the lots. To a different developer this time, pre-construction sales. She collected $1.8 million in deposits. Emma's greed was endless. But greed makes people careless, and I was about to use that against her. Marcus assembled what he called the War Council in his conference room. Me, Rebecca, David Kim, and a new addition, Jennifer Park, a forensic accountant who'd helped the FBI bring down embezzlement rings. "Here's what we have," Marcus said, organizing documents into folders. "Forged property records, fraudulent tax auction, shell companies, HOA fund, embezzlement, and now a second wave of fraud with Phase 2. We have enough for criminal charges." "What about Thomas Webb?" I asked. Rebecca nodded. "He's ready to flip." I convinced him that cooperating is his only chance to avoid prison. He kept everything: emails from Emma with explicit instructions, text messages from Dale, even recordings of phone calls where they discussed the forgery. Recordings. Marcus's eyes lit up. He recorded them. Pennsylvania is a 2-party consent state, so the recordings aren't admissible in court. But they corroborate everything else. Webb is willing to testify that Emma and Dale instructed him to create false tax delinquency records, backdate documents, and rush the auction through before anyone noticed. Jennifer pulled up spreadsheets on her laptop. "I've traced the money. Emma's shell company, Meadowbrook Management LLC, is registered to her sister in Delaware, but the bank accounts show regular transfers to Emma's personal account. She's been sloppy. There's also a pattern of payments from vendors landscaping security pool maintenance. Those vendors are owned by Dale's cousin and Emma's college roommate. They're inflating invoices by 40–60% and kicking back the difference. How much total has she stolen? I asked. From HOA funds alone, about $380,000 over 2 years. Combined with the land fraud and Phase 2 deposits, we're looking at $6.8 million in criminal proceeds. I leaned back in my chair. The numbers were staggering. Emma and Dale had built an empire on stolen land. What's our move? I asked Marcus. We file criminal complaints with the state attorney general and the FBI. Wire fraud, conspiracy forgery, theft by deception, this is federal now. Simultaneously, we file a quiet title action to establish your ownership plus civil suits for damages and restitution. How long? 6 months to a year for criminal proceedings. The civil case could take longer. But here's the risk. Emma knows she's cornered. Cornered animals get dangerous. He was right. 2 days after we filed the quiet title action, I found a notice stapled to the door of the trailer I'd parked on the edge of the property. HOA violation. Unauthorized structure. $500 per day, fine until removed. I called Marcus. Can she do this? Technically, she's claiming HOA authority over the property. It's bogus, but she's trying to harass you into leaving. Ignore it. I ignored it. The notices kept coming. Unauthorized vehicle, my demolition equipment. $500 divided by day. Failure to maintain landscaping. $500 divided by day. Noise violation. $500 divided by day. Within a week, Emma was claiming I owed $14 0 inches fines. Then Dale made his move. The county building inspector showed up at my trailer with a clipboard and a smug expression. Sir, we've received complaints about unpermitted structures and equipment on this property. I need to see your permits. I don't need permits. This is private property, and I own a licensed demolition company. You'll need to move your equipment within 72 hours or face daily fines of $1,000 plus potential seizure. On whose authority? He showed me the work order, signed by Dale Johnson. I took a photo. I'll be speaking with my lawyer. That night, Emma called a special community meeting. I wasn't invited, but Sarah Miller recorded it and sent it to me. Emma stood before the community with printouts of my quiet title filing. This man is trying to steal everything we've built. He's filed a frivolous lawsuit claiming he owns our land. He wants to demolish our homes and sell the property to developers. We need to stand together and fight him. An older woman raised her hand. Emma, why would he have original property documents from 1947 if they're fake? Anyone can forge old documents, Emma said smoothly. He probably made them in his garage. This is a shakedown. He thinks we'll settle and pay him to go away. Then why not just show us the original auction records? Jake Miller stood up. Prove your purchase was legitimate. Emma's expression hardened. I don't owe you an explanation, Jake. I'm your HOA president, and I'm protecting your property values. If you can't trust my leadership, maybe you should sell your house and leave. The room went silent. Emma had just threatened a homeowner for asking questions. Sarah stood up next to her husband. That's not okay, Emma. We have a right to know the truth about our property. Sit down, Emma snapped. Both of you. Or I'll have you removed for disrupting an official HOA meeting. 3 other families walked out with the Millers. Emma was losing control. That's when I decided to set my trap. I had Marcus file an amended quiet title action, intentionally weak with obvious procedural errors that Emma's lawyers would easily spot. I wanted her overconfident. I wanted her thinking she'd already won. She took the bait. At a press conference outside the HOA office, Emma stood with Dale and their lawyer announcing that my lawsuit had fatal flaws and would be dismissed within weeks. This is harassment, Emma declared to the local news cameras. Mr. Brennan is a con artist trying to extort money from hardworking families. We will fight him to the end and protect our community. The reporter asked, do you have documentation proving your ownership? Absolutely. Complete and verified by the county. My husband personally oversaw the transaction to ensure everything was legal. Dale nodded beside her, looking confident. Perfect. They were on record under oath of public statement, claiming the documents were legitimate. When we proved they were forged, they'd be trapped in their own lies. Rebecca continued digging and found something explosive. Emma had been communicating with the Phase 2 developer through encrypted emails, but she'd gotten lazy using her personal Gmail account for some messages. Rebecca obtained them through a legal subpoena. In one email, Emma wrote, "The property is secure. My husband controls county records. There's no way anyone can prove fraud. Just keep the deposits quiet until construction starts. In another, if anyone asks questions, I'll handle the HOA. I've got enough dirt on half these people to keep them in line. This was consciousness of guilt. Emma knew she was committing fraud and was actively covering it up. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. One of Emma's HOA allies, a man named Robert Chen, who served as treasurer, walked into Marcus's office with a cardboard box. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his hands shaking. "Emma told me I was just helping with bookkeeping. But I found these." Inside the box were duplicate financial records showing the real numbers, the kickbacks, the embezzled funds, the shell company transfers. Robert had kept copies of everything, worried he'd be blamed when the scheme fell apart. "Will you testify?" Marcus asked. Robert nodded. "I have a family. Emma threatened my wife's job. Her sister is my wife's boss. I thought I had to go along with it, but this is fraud. Real people are being hurt." With Robert's testimony and documents, we had an insider witness. Someone who'd seen Emma operate firsthand, who could describe her methods and motives. The case was becoming airtight. Then Emma made her biggest mistake. She got desperate. I knew I couldn't just bulldoze 58 houses and walk away. These families were victims too. They'd paid real money for real homes, even if the land beneath was stolen. I needed a solution that delivered justice to Emma while protecting innocent people. Marcus and I spent a week crafting a plan. Here's the strategy, Marcus explained. We pursue full criminal prosecution against Emma, Dale, and Webb. We freeze their assets under civil forfeiture laws, all $6.8 million they stole. Then we use that restitution money to make the homeowners whole. How we offer to sell them the land their houses sit on at actual cost. Essentially what Emma paid at the fraudulent auction adjusted for fair market value. Since we'll have $6.8 million in restitution, we can subsidize the difference. The homeowners pay reasonable prices, get legitimate deeds, and you recover the value of your land. It was brilliant. Emma's stolen money would be used to fix the problem she'd created. But first, I needed allies in the community. I started with the Millers. Sarah and Jake invited me over on a Saturday afternoon. Their house was modest but well kept, filled with photos of their 2 young kids. "We've been doing research," Jake said, spreading documents on their kitchen table. "Emma's been running this HOA like a dictatorship. Did you know she hired her own sister's company for landscaping at triple the market rate? She also approved a $120,000 security system that doesn't work half the time," Sarah added. "Residents have been complaining for months, but she ignores them." "What if I told you I have a way to fix all of this?" I said. "Emma goes to prison, you get legitimate ownership of your home, and the HOA gets reformed with actual accountability." They listened as I explained the plan. When I finished, Jake extended his hand. "We're in. What do you need? Spread the word to people you trust. I need homeowners who are willing to testify about Emma's abuse of power, the financial mismanagement, everything. Build me a coalition." Over the next 3 weeks, Sarah and Jake did exactly that. They organized quiet meetings at homes, coffee shops, anywhere Emma wouldn't notice. The Martinez family joined Carlos, and Sofia Martinez had 3 kids and had been struggling with Emma's increasing HOA fees. The Hendersons Jr., retired teachers on a fixed income, had been hit with $3.00 bogus fines for improper holiday decorations. One by one, families came forward with stories of Emma's tyranny. Meanwhile, Rebecca uncovered Emma's most ambitious scheme yet. "You're not going to believe this," she said, pulling up property records on her laptop. "Emma filed permits for Phase 2, using your forged signature right. Those permits show 40 houses on 22 acres. But look at this recent survey." She zoomed in on a map. "That's not 22 acres. She's claiming 35 acres, including land that's actually part of the state forest preserve." My jaw dropped. "She's trying to steal state land too." "Yep." She moved the boundary markers and filed a fraudulent survey. If Phase 2 had gone through, she'd have developed protected forest land. That's a federal crime. Exactly. Which means the FBI is very interested in talking to Emma. The walls were closing in, but Emma didn't see it yet. She was too busy planning Phase 2 and counting her money. Then Marcus filed the real lawsuit. Unlike the intentionally weak, quiet title action, this one was a monster. 47 pages of detailed allegations supported by hundreds of exhibits, forged documents, financial records, witness statements, everything. We filed it simultaneously with criminal complaints to the state attorney general and the FBI. The next morning, FBI agents executed search warrants on Emma's home, Dale's office, and the HOA building. They seized computers, financial records, phones, everything. Emma's Facebook post that afternoon was desperate, under attack by corrupt feds working with con artists trying to steal your homes. We'll fight this tyranny. But the homeowners were starting to wake up. At the emergency HOA meeting, Emma called 40 residents showed up, demanding answers. Emma stood at the front of the room, her usual confidence cracking. "The allegations against me are completely false," she began. "This is a coordinated attack." "Then show us the original purchase documents," Carlos Martinez interrupted. "Right now. Prove you legitimately bought this land." Emma stammered. Those are with my attorney." "For the lawsuit," Convenient Sofia Martinez said. "You've had weeks to produce them. Why haven't you?" Another resident stood. "What about the HOA funds? I heard the FBI seized our financial records." "What are they looking for?" "That's confidential. It's our money," someone shouted from the back. "We have a right to know." The meeting dissolved into chaos. Emma tried to regain control, but it was over. Homeowners were demanding a special election to remove her as president. They wanted an independent audit of HOA finances. They wanted answers. Emma fled the meeting through a back door. That night, Rebecca called me. "Emma just bought a one-way plane ticket to Costa Rica. She's running. When flight leaves in 3 days, I immediately called the FBI agent handling the case, Special Agent Lisa Torres. She assured me they'd been monitoring Emma's movements. We'll arrest her before she boards," Agent Torres said. "We just needed her to make the move. Flight risk strengthens our case for no bail." 2 days later, FBI agents arrested Emma at the airport. She had $47 0 inches cash in her carry-on bag and a laptop full of encrypted files. Dale was arrested simultaneously at his office. The local news covered it live. Video of Emma in handcuffs screaming at reporters that she was innocent, that this was a conspiracy. She looked nothing like the composed HOA president who'd threatened me at the gate months ago. The next week, federal prosecutors unsealed the indictments. Emma and Dale faced 17 felony counts, including wire fraud, conspiracy, forgery, theft, and money laundering. Thomas Webb was charged separately, but immediately took a plea deal in exchange for testimony. Then came Dale's betrayal. Facing 20 years in federal prison, Dale's lawyer negotiated a cooperation agreement. In a sworn deposition, Dale laid out the entire scheme and blamed Emma for masterminding it. "It was her idea from the start," Dale testified. "She identified the property, told me how to flag it, as abandoned, coached Webb on creating the fake documents. I went along with it because she threatened to divorce me and take everything. She's ruthless." Whether that was true or just Dale trying to save himself, it didn't matter. His testimony corroborated everything we'd gathered independently. The criminal case was solid. Now I needed to finalize the civil solution. Marcus organized a town hall meeting at the local community center, inviting all Meadowbrook Estates residents. 53 families showed up, everyone except Emma's few remaining loyalists. I stood before them, nervous but determined. "I know many of you see me as the enemy," I began, "the man trying to take your homes. But that's not what this is about. You were defrauded just like me. Emma Johnson stole my land and sold it to you under false pretenses. None of us chose this situation." I explained the plan. The restitution money from Emma and Dale's frozen assets would be used to compensate them. I'd sell each family the parcel their house sat on at fair market value, with the restitution covering most of the cost. They'd pay a fraction of what they'd already paid Emma, and they'd get legitimate, clear titles. "What about people who can't afford even that?" a woman asked. "We'll work out payment plans." "No interest. The goal is to make this right, not to profit from your suffering." Carlos Martinez stood up. "What about the HOA? What happens to that? Emma's HOA is dissolved. You're free to form a new one, run it however you want, or don't have one at all. That's your choice." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Sarah Miller started clapping. Jake joined her. Then the Martinez family. Within seconds, the whole room was applauding. For the first time in months, I felt like this might actually work. But Emma had one more card to play. Emma made a bail after 2 weeks in federal detention. Her lawyer convinced a judge she wasn't a flight risk, despite the airport arrest, arguing that the Costa Rica ticket was for a pre-planned vacation and the cash was for shopping. The bail was set at $500, 000, secured against property Dale still owned. She was out, but she was desperate. The first sign of trouble came when Rebecca's car was keyed in the parking lot of her office building. The next day, someone spray-painted LIAR across the front window of Marcus's law office. Nothing we could prove, but the message was clear. Then Emma showed up at my demolition company. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the warehouse going over equipment manifests when my foreman Danny rushed in. "Boss, we got a problem." Outside, 3 black SUVs had pulled into the parking lot. Emma emerged from the middle vehicle flanked by 4 men in dark suits. Not lawyers. These guys looked like enforcers, ex-military thick necks, dead eyes. I walked out to meet them. "You're trespassing on private property." Emma smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We need to talk. Somewhere private. We have nothing to discuss." She gestured to the men around her. "I really think we do." Against my better judgment, and with my phone recording in my pocket, I led her into my office. The 4 men stayed outside, arms crossed, making their presence known. Emma sat down without being invited. "You've made quite a mess of things, Mr. Brennan. I'm cleaning up your mess, Emma. There's a difference. Here's what's going to happen," she said, leaning forward. "You're going to drop all charges, civil and criminal. You'll accept a settlement, let's say $2 million, and walk away. The homeowners keep their houses, I keep my freedom, everyone wins. Except I'd be letting a criminal walk free." Her expression hardened. "You don't understand who you're dealing with. My husband knows people, important people, judges, prosecutors, state officials. One phone call and your case disappears. The FBI doesn't work that way. The FBI can be persuaded to drop cases when their evidence is problematic." She pulled out her phone and showed me photos. Pictures of Marcus leaving a bar late at night, Rebecca meeting with someone in a parking garage. Innocent photos, but taken from angles that suggested something inappropriate. "We have dirt on everyone in your little team," Emma said. "Your lawyer has a gambling problem. Did you know that your PI had an affair with a client's husband 3 years ago? We can destroy their credibility. Are you seriously trying to blackmail me right now? I'm offering you a way out. Take the money, drop the case, and this all goes away. Or keep pushing, and I'll make sure everyone you care about suffers. Your business, your employees, your reputation, all of it gone." She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "You have 48 hours to decide. After that, things get ugly." As she walked to the door, she paused. "Oh, and if I'm going down, I'm taking everyone with me. Those families you're trying to help, I'll make sure they lose everything. I have documentation implicating half the homeowners in HOA violations that'll tie up their properties in legal hell for years. They'll never be able to sell or refinance. You destroy innocent families to save yourself. I do whatever it takes to protect what's mine." She left her men following like shadows. I sat in my office, hands shaking with rage. Then I remembered my phone had recorded everything. I called Agent Torres immediately. "Emma just came to my office with hired muscle and threatened me. I have it all on tape. Send it to me now. That's witness intimidation, obstruction of justice. We can arrest her again." But before I could send the file, my phone rang. It was Thomas Webb, the county assessor who'd flipped on Emma. "They found me," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Emma's people. They broke into my house. They didn't take anything, just left a photo of my grandkids on my kitchen table, with their school address written on the back. Where are you now? Police station. But I'm scared. Maybe I should recant my testimony, Thomas. Listen to me. Emma's desperate. That means we're winning. Agent Torres can put you in protective custody. Don't back down now." After I hung up, Rebecca called. "We have a problem. Dale Johnson just filed a motion to suppress all of Webb's testimony. Claims it was coerced. Of course he did. Emma's playing every card she has. There's more. Someone leaked the homeowner compensation plan to the media. Channel 7 just ran a story making it sound like you're trying to force families to buy their own land at inflated prices. The comments online are brutal. I pulled up the news article on my computer. The headline read, "Local business owner demands millions from families in land dispute." The story was completely twisted, making me look like a greedy opportunist. Emma's smear campaign had gone public. That night, I received a call from Carlos Martinez. "My wife and I are getting death threats on Facebook. People saying we're traitors for working with you. Emma's supporters are organizing a protest." "I'm sorry, Carlos. I never wanted." "Don't apologize. We know what she's doing. But some of the other families are getting scared. They're talking about backing out of the deal, maybe siding with Emma again." The coalition was fracturing. The next morning, Emma held a press conference on the steps of the county courthouse. Dale stood beside her, looking defeated but playing his role. A crowd of supporters held signs, "Save our homes and stop the land grab." "Mr. Brennan is trying to evict 58 families," Emma declared to the cameras. "He's using a corrupt FBI investigation to steal homes from hardworking people. We will fight this injustice in every court in the land." A reporter asked, "What about the evidence of forged documents, lies manufactured by his team?" "We have been fully transparent. The real criminal here is the man trying to make millions off vulnerable families." Dale nodded along, adding, The county has fully reviewed the transaction and confirmed everything was legitimate. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Emma was playing the victim, rallying public support, and pressuring prosecutors to back off. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd just lied on camera under oath of public statement, doubling down on claims we could prove were false. Every word she spoke was another nail in her coffin. That afternoon, I met with Agent Torres and Marcus at the FBI field office. Emma's threatening witnesses, intimidating families, and lying to the media, I said. When do we stop her? Agent Torres pulled up a file on her computer. We've been building a RICO case. Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Emma's not just a fraudster, she's running a criminal enterprise. The HOA scheme, the kickbacks, the witness intimidation, it all fits. How long until you move? We're ready now. But I need you to do something first. She slid a small device across the table. This is a wire. We want you to meet with Emma one more time. Get her talking about the threats, the bribes, anything that shows consciousness of guilt. She'll suspect something. Maybe. But she's arrogant. She thinks she's untouchable because her husband has connections. Use that against her. I stared at the wire. It was risky, but it might be the final piece we needed. When tomorrow? Tell her you're ready to negotiate. She'll jump at the chance. That night I barely slept. I kept playing scenarios in my head. What if Emma suspected the wire? What if her men searched me? What if this whole thing blew up? But I thought about the families counting on me. The Millers, the Martinezes, the Hendersons, junior people, who'd done nothing wrong but were caught in Emma's web of lies. I had to see this through. The next morning I called Emma's lawyer and requested a meeting. 2 hours later I received a text with an address, a private estate outside town, probably borrowed from one of her wealthy friends. I drove there with the wire taped to my chest, my heart pounding. Marcus and Agent Torres were monitoring from a van 2 blocks away. Emma met me at the door alone this time. Smart decision, she said. Come in. The house was massive, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, walls lined with expensive art. Emma led me to a study and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. To new beginnings, she said, raising her glass. I didn't drink. Let's talk terms. Simple. You drop everything, criminal complaints, civil suits, all of it. In exchange, you get $2 million cash wired wherever you want. No taxes, no trail. And the homeowners, they keep their houses under the current arrangement. I remain HOA president. Life goes on. What about your husband? The federal charges. Emma smiled coldly. Dale's charges go away. I have insurance documentation showing that certain prosecutors and judges have, shall we say, skeletons in their closets. Once those documents become public, people will be very motivated to make this case disappear. You're blackmailing federal officials. I'm ensuring my freedom. Do we have a deal or not? This was it. The confession Agent Torres needed. What if I say no? I asked. Emma's smile vanished. Then those families you're trying to help will suffer. I'll tie up their properties in legal challenges for decades. I'll leak personal information about them, affairs, bankruptcies, criminal records. I'll destroy their lives one by one until they beg you to take my deal. You'd really do that. I've worked too hard to lose everything now. If I go down, I'm taking everyone with me. You, your lawyers, those families, everyone. Do you understand? I stood up. I understand perfectly. Emma extended her hand. So we have a deal. I looked at her hand, then back at her face. No, we don't. Her expression turned to ice. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. I don't think so. See, Emma, I've been recording this entire conversation, and the FBI has been listening to every word. The color drained from her face. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone and played back the last 2 minutes. Her voice crystal clear, threatening families and admitting to blackmail. Emma lunged for the phone, but I stepped back. Too late. It's already transmitted. She stared at me, rage and panic warring in her eyes. Then she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. You think this changes anything? She said, her voice manic. I have leverage you can't imagine. Those families will hate you when they lose their homes. The media will crucify you. You'll spend years in court fighting me, and I'll make every single day hell. We'll see about that. I walked toward the door, but Emma blocked my path. You don't get to walk away from me. Move, Emma. Or what? You'll have your FBI friends arrest me. Go ahead. I'll be out on bail in 48 hours, and I'll make sure everyone you care about suffers. The door burst open. Agent Torres entered with 4 other agents, weapons drawn. Emma Johnson, you're under arrest for witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit extortion. Emma's face twisted with fury as they handcuffed her. This isn't over. I have rights. You can't. You have the right to remain silent, Agent Torres said calmly. I suggest you use it. As they led her out, Emma locked eyes with me. Those families will hate you, she hissed. When they lose everything, they'll remember this was your fault. I stood in the empty study, my hands still shaking from adrenaline. Agent Torres returned a moment later. You did good, she said. That recording gives us everything we need. What happens now? Now, we finish this. The federal courthouse was packed the morning of Emma's arraignment. News vans lined the street, reporters jockeying for position. The case had become a media sensation: corrupt HOA president, stolen land, defrauded families. Everyone wanted to see how it ended. I sat in the gallery next to Marcus, watching as Emma was led into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit. Gone was the designer wardrobe and pearl necklace. She looked small, diminished, and absolutely furious. The judge, Claudia Morrison, brought in from the Eastern District to avoid conflicts of interest, reviewed the charges with a stern expression. Miss Johnson, you're charged with 17 federal counts, including wire fraud, conspiracy forgery, witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and attempted extortion. How do you plead? Emma's lawyer, an expensive defense attorney from Philadelphia, stood. Not guilty to all charges, Your Honor. We maintain that Miss Johnson is the victim of a coordinated attack by individuals attempting to defraud. Save it for trial, counselor, Judge Morrison interrupted. Let's discuss bail. The government is requesting remand based on flight risk and witness intimidation. Agent Torres presented evidence: the airport arrest, the Costa Rica ticket, the threats against Thomas Webb and me. Emma's lawyer argued that she was a respected community leader with no prior record. Judge Morrison wasn't impressed. Miss Johnson attempted to flee the country with $47.00 cash. She subsequently violated bail conditions by threatening witnesses. Bail is revoked. Defendant will remain in federal custody pending trial. Emma's face went pale. Your Honor, please sit down, Miss Johnson. Dale's hearing was next. His lawyer immediately presented a cooperation agreement. Dale would plead guilty to 3 counts in exchange for testimony against Emma and a reduced sentence recommendation of 8 years. When Dale took the stand during the preliminary hearing, the courtroom went silent. Tell the court about the property scheme, the prosecutor said. Dale, looking like he'd aged 10 years, spoke quietly. It was Emma's idea from the start. She identified properties with absent or deceased owners, then had me flag them as abandoned in the county system. We'd create fake tax delinquency records, with Thomas Webb's help rush them through sham auctions, and Emma would purchase them for pennies. How many properties total? 3. Mr. Brennan's was the largest and most profitable. The other 2 were smaller vacant lots that Emma sold to developers. And Emma directed all of this. Dale nodded. She planned every detail. She researched property laws, found loopholes, coached me on what records to falsify. I went along with it because... He paused, his voice cracking. Because I was weak. She convinced me we deserved wealth, that we were smarter than everyone else. I was wrong. Emma's lawyer objected repeatedly, but the damage was done. Dale's testimony corroborated everything: Webb's records, the forensic evidence, the paper trail. The criminal trial lasted 3 weeks. Thomas Webb testified, first walking the jury through exactly how Emma had instructed him to forge documents. He brought printouts of emails where Emma explicitly told him to backdate the tax notices and make sure there's no postal tracking. Rebecca presented her investigation findings: the shell companies, the kickbacks, the embezzled HOA funds. Jennifer Park, the forensic accountant, traced every dollar Emma had stolen, showing the jury complex diagrams of money flowing from victims to Emma's accounts. David Kim, the document examiner, testified about the forged signatures and county seals. He projected enlarged images of the forgeries, pointing out microscopic inconsistencies that proved they were fake. I testified about my family's ownership of the land, my father's death, and Emma's threats. I described finding 58 houses on my property, Emma's arrogance at our first meeting, and her escalating intimidation. The defense tried to paint me as an opportunist who'd abandoned the property and only returned when he smelled money. Emma's lawyer suggested I'd forged the original deed, that my father had actually sold the land years ago. But Marcus destroyed that theory on cross-examination. He presented tax payment records going back to 1,947 continuous ownership documentation and testimony from neighbors who'd known my family for decades. Then came the recording from my wire. The courtroom listened in complete silence as Emma's voice filled the room. I'll destroy their lives one by one until they beg you to take my deal. If I go down, I'm taking everyone with me. When it finished, several jurors were shaking their heads in disgust. Emma took the stand in her own defense against her lawyer's advice, I later learned. She claimed everything was legitimate, that Dale and Webb were lying to save themselves, that I was running an elaborate con. The prosecutor demolished her on cross-examination. Miss Johnson, you testified that you purchased the property at a legitimate county auction, correct? Yes. But there's no record of any public notice for that auction. No newspaper publication, no posted notices, nothing. How do you explain that? The county must have made an error. An error that benefited only you, an error that just happened to occur on property your husband had access to in the county system, Emma stammered through non-answers. The prosecutor produced email after email showing Emma's knowledge of the fraud, her instructions to conspirators, her efforts to cover tracks. The final blow came from Robert Chen, the former HOA treasurer. He testified about Emma's embezzlement schemes, the inflated vendor contracts, the kickbacks. He brought copies of 2 sets of financial books, one showing legitimate expenses, another showing the real numbers. Did Miss Johnson know you were keeping duplicate records? The prosecutor asked. She insisted on it, Robert said. She told me it was standard business practice to have internal records separate from what we showed homeowners. After 3 weeks, the case went to the jury. They deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all 17 counts. Emma's face crumpled when the verdict was read. She sobbed as the judge thanked the jury and set a sentencing date. 2 months later, Emma stood before Judge Morrison for sentencing. The prosecutor requested 20 years. Emma's lawyer begged for leniency, citing her lack of prior record and her difficult childhood. Judge Morrison wasn't moved. Miss Johnson, you engaged in a sophisticated criminal enterprise that defrauded dozens of innocent families and stole land that had been in Mr. Brennan's family for generations. You showed no remorse, threatened witnesses, and attempted to blackmail federal officials. You corrupted government processes meant to protect citizens, and you did it all out of pure greed. Emma stared at the floor, tears streaming down her face. I'm sentencing you to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years supervised release. You will pay $7.5 million in restitution to your victims, and you are permanently barred from serving in any HOA or property management role. Dale received 8 years as per his cooperation agreement. Thomas Webb got 2 years probation and community service. But the criminal case was only half the battle. The civil settlement still had to be finalized. Marcus organized a meeting at the community center with all Meadowbrook Estates residents. The room was tense. Some families still didn't trust me, worried about losing their homes. Here's the situation, Marcus explained. Emma and Dale's assets have been seized, $6.8 million total. That money will be placed in a restitution fund. Mr. Brennan is offering to sell each family the land parcel their house sits on at fair market value, approximately $15,000 per lot. The restitution fund will cover $12,000 per family, meaning you'll pay only $3,000 for legitimate clear title to your land. A woman in the back raised her hand. What if we can't afford even that payment plan's no interest extended over 5 years if needed, I said. My goal isn't to profit from this, it's to make things right. What about Emma's HOA? Someone asked. Dissolved, Marcus said. You're free to form a new association with fair rules and elected leadership, or operate without one. Your choice. Over the next month, all 58 families accepted the settlement. The restitution fund covered most of the cost, and I personally subsidized 5 families who were struggling financially. Sarah and Jake Miller organized the first meeting of the new HOA, now called the Henderson Fields Homeowners Association, named after my old neighbor and my father. They elected Carlos Martinez as president. The new bylaws included term limits, financial transparency, and democratic decision-making. Everything Emma's HOA wasn't. On the day we signed the final property transfers, Sophia Martinez pulled me aside. We misjudged you, she said, her eyes wet. When Emma said you were trying to steal our homes, we believed her. We're sorry. You were protecting your family, I said. I understand. You could have bulldozed everything and sold the land to developers for millions. Instead, you helped us. Why I thought about my father, about the values he'd taught me, because it was the right thing to do. 6 months after Emma's sentencing, I stood at my father's grave with a bottle of his favorite whiskey. I poured a little on the headstone. We got her, Dad, I said quietly. The land's being used the way you wanted, for families, for community. I think you'd be proud. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment I could almost hear his voice. I am, son, I am. 6 months after the settlement, I drove through Henderson Fields on a Saturday morning. The transformation was remarkable. The cookie-cutter houses Emma had rushed into construction now had personality, different paint colors, unique landscaping, kids' playgrounds and yards. The oppressive uniformity was gone, replaced by a real community where people actually wanted to live. I'd kept 20 acres at the southern end of the property, including the old homestead where my father had lived. The rest belonged to the 58 families fair and square. My demolition company had become unexpectedly busy in Henderson Fields. During renovation work, we discovered that Emma had cut every possible corner during construction. Faulty wiring, substandard plumbing foundations that didn't meet code. The houses looked fine but were disasters waiting to happen. I'd made a deal with the new HOA. My company would fix the code violations at cost, no profit. It was the least I could do. On this particular Saturday, I was helping the Martinez family repair their deck when Carlos called me over. "Someone's here to see you," he said, gesturing toward a young woman standing by my truck. She was in her mid-20s, dressed simply in jeans and a jacket. She looked nervous. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Ashley Johnson, Emma's daughter." I set down my tools, uncertain. "What can I do for you?" I wanted to apologize, she said quickly. "For my mother. For everything she did." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." Ashley's voice cracked. "I haven't spoken to my mother in 4 years. She's not a good person. Never was. I just wanted you to know that not everyone in our family is like her." We walked away from the house, finding a quiet spot under an old oak tree. "What happened between you two?" I asked gently. Ashley took a deep breath. "My mother's always been obsessed with status and money. When I was growing up, she'd run scams, small stuff at first. Lying to return items she'd already used, inflating insurance claims, cheating contractors. She taught me that everyone was either a mark or competition. That must have been hard. I didn't realize how twisted it was until college. I had an ethics professor who made me see what my mother was. I confronted her, told her I wanted no part of her schemes. She disowned me on the spot, said I was weak and stupid." Ashley showed me a photo on her phone, a little boy, maybe 3 years old, with a bright smile. "That's my son Marcus. Named after my father's father, not after Dale. I want him to grow up, knowing honesty and integrity, everything my mother isn't. Does Emma know about him? She's never met him. Never will, if I can help it." Ashley paused. "I visited her in prison once right after sentencing. I thought maybe she'd show remorse, realize what she'd lost. But she just blamed everyone else. You, Dale, the FBI, the homeowners. She couldn't see that she'd destroyed her own life." "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be. You gave those families justice. My mother needed to be stopped." Ashley pulled an envelope from her pocket. "I wrote letters to each family in Henderson Fields, apologizing on behalf of my family. Would you help me distribute them over the next week?" Ashley and I delivered 58 letters. Most families were gracious, some were skeptical, but everyone appreciated the gesture. Then something unexpected happened. I received a letter forwarded through Marcus's office. It was from a man named Richard Paulson in Oregon. "Dear Mr. Brennan," it began, "I saw news coverage of your case against Emma Johnson. 10 years ago, she and Dale ran the same scheme in my town. They stole my family's 40-acre farm through forged tax documents and built a commercial plaza on it. I tried to fight them, but Dale's connections made my case disappear. I lost everything, my land, my money, fighting legal battles, eventually my marriage. I've been living with that injustice for a decade. Thank you for exposing them. You gave me closure I never thought I'd get." I stared at the letter, feeling sick. Emma and Dale had done this before. How many other victims were out there? I forwarded the letter to Agent Torres. She called me an hour later. "We've opened an investigation into Emma's prior activities," she said. "If there are other victims, we'll find them. They might be able to file civil suits now that Emma's been convicted." How many people did she hurt? We're finding more every day. Emma and Dale moved around a lot before settling here. Different counties, different states. Always the same pattern: identify vulnerable properties, forge documents, steal land. Over the following months, 7 other victims came forward. Some had lost family farms, others vacant land they'd planned to retire on. Emma and Dale had destroyed lives, systematically driven by nothing but greed. But there was one piece of good news. Richard Paulson's case was reopened, based on Emma's conviction. The prosecutors who'd buried it originally were themselves investigated for corruption. Turned out Dale had blackmailed them with fabricated evidence. Richard won a $2.3 million settlement from the city and recovered a portion of his land. He called me personally to say thank you. "You didn't just save those families in Henderson Fields," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved people like me who thought justice was impossible. You gave us hope. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like someone who'd simply refused to let a bully win. 1 year after Emma's sentencing, Henderson Fields held its first annual community barbecue. 200 people showed up, residents, kids, even some folks from neighboring areas who'd heard about the community's rebirth. Carlos Martinez, still serving as HOA, president, gave a speech. "A year ago, we were living under a tyrant," he said. "Someone who controlled every aspect of our lives, who stole from us, who made us afraid to ask questions. Today, we're free. We own our homes legitimately. We govern ourselves democratically, and we owe that to one man who refused to take the easy path." He gestured toward me. "Michael Brennan could have sued us, evicted us, sold this land to the highest bidder. Instead, he fought for justice while protecting innocent people. He's proof that doing the right thing still matters." The crowd applauded. I felt embarrassed but grateful. Sarah Miller approached with her 2 kids. "We want to show you something," she said. She led me to the community park, a new addition the HOA had voted to build on shared land. There was a playground, picnic tables, and a small memorial garden. In the center stood a stone marker with an inscription, "Henderson Fields, built on justice, sustained by community." In memory of Mr. Harold Henderson and Thomas Brennan, who loved this land and taught us the value of integrity. My father's name carved in stone, honored by people he'd never met. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, tears streaming down my face. Jake put his hand on my shoulder. "Your dad would be proud." That evening, as the barbecue wound down, I drove out to my father's old homestead. I'd been slowly renovating it, thinking maybe I'd move in someday instead of my apartment in town. I sat on the porch with a beer, watching the sun set over the fields. In the distance, I could see kids playing, families, laughing, dogs running through yards. This was what my father had wanted. Not an empty monument to the past, but land that served people, built community, created homes. Emma had tried to steal that and profit from it, but in the end her greed had been her downfall. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. "Thought you'd want to know. Emma was denied early release. Parole board cited her complete lack of remorse. She'll serve the full 12 years. Good." Another text, this one from Ashley Marcus's preschool, "is doing a project on heroes. He insisted I tell him about the man who stopped his grandmother from hurting people. I told him about you. He wants to send you a drawing." I smiled. Maybe something good could come from Emma's bloodline after all. As the stars came out, I thought about the long journey from discovering 58 houses on my land to standing here now surrounded by a thriving community. It hadn't been about revenge. It had never been about revenge. It was about justice, about protecting innocent people, about honoring my father's memory and the values he'd taught me. Emma Johnson had built 58 houses on my land. But in the end, those houses became something she never intended, a real community built on honesty, fairness, and respect. Too bad for Emma, she'd messed with the wrong demolition company owner. I didn't tear down her houses. I tore down her empire, one lie at a time, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. As I sit here today, 3 years after everything began, I often think about what this experience taught me. It wasn't just about recovering stolen land or bringing criminals to justice. It was about something deeper, something that matters in all our lives. We live in a world where people in positions of power sometimes abuse that authority. HOA presidents, county officials, business leaders, people who think their position makes them untouchable. They count on regular folks being too scared, too tired, or too broke to fight back. Emma Johnson was convinced she'd get away with it. She had connections, money, and a carefully built facade of respectability. She thought that was enough. But here's what she didn't understand. Integrity isn't about being powerful. It's about being persistent. It's about refusing to compromise your values even when the easy path is right there in front of you. I could have taken Emma's $2 million bribe and walked away. Nobody would have blamed me. The legal battle was expensive, exhausting, and risky. But those 58 families would have remained under her control, bleeding money into her schemes, living in unsafe houses built with corrupted permits and cut corners. The lesson I learned, the one I hope you take from this story, is that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. When you see injustice, you have a choice: look away or stand up. When someone tries to bully you into submission, you have a choice: surrender or fight back with truth. Those families in Henderson Fields didn't just get their homes secured, they got their dignity back. They learned that standing together against tyranny works. They discovered that ordinary people can defeat powerful adversaries when they refuse to give up. And maybe most importantly, they learn to recognize the warning signs: the HOA president who won't show financial records, the official who dismisses legitimate questions, the authority figure who rules through fear rather than respect. If you're facing your own Emma Johnson, whether it's an abusive HOA, a corrupt landlord, or anyone else exploiting their power, know this: you're not alone. Document everything. Build your case carefully. Find allies who share your values. And never ever let someone convince you that injustice is just the way things are. Truth has a way of surfacing. Justice might move slowly, but it moves. And integrity, real integrity, will always outlast corruption. So I'm asking you now, have you ever faced a situation where someone in power tried to take advantage of you? Have you stood up against injustice or wished you had? Share your story in the comments below. Let's build a community of people who refuse to let the Emma Johnsons of the world win. And if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that standing up for what's right matters, hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Let's prove that integrity and community are stronger than greed and corruption. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, you have more power than you think. Use it wisely.